Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 75th Soil and Water Conservation Society Conference. Coming to you remotely, my name is Dennis Toddy, and I'm the director of the USDA Midwest Climate Hub, and I'm the moderator for this session. We have today a distinguished set of panelists from associated with the climate hubs across the country. If you're not familiar with the USDA climate hubs, we're going to learn a little bit more about them today. And the focus of what we're going to be talking about is the different efforts of the climate hubs across the country, some of the activities, some of the products, some of the services they are creating to deal with conservation efforts. And these deal with a wide variety of conservation efforts on different types of agricultural lands, from managed row crops to pasture and rangeland to a wide variety of adaptation issues. If some of you were able to attend the session earlier this afternoon, you heard about a variety of activities going on for climate mitigation efforts, greenhouse gas sequestration, and some of the shaping of the climate change issues from extension of the north central part of the country, from private industry, and you heard from two USDA senators on legislative efforts at trying to develop some carbon sequestration efforts at the federal level. We're very happy to hear those progressing. Now you're going to hear some practical actions that are going on across the country from the USDA Climate Hubs, and a bit more about the Climate Hubs. Let me introduce our presenters as I have them on my screen. We have Dr. Donnell Peck, the director of the Northern Plains Climate Hub in Fort Collins, Colorado. We have Dr. Kurt Dell, who is affiliated with the Northeast Climate Hub. I think you believe a co-director, is that correct, Kurt? Co-director of the Northeast Climate Hub with ARS?
Yes. That's correct.
Okay, and I'll let when they each do their session, I'll let them introduce themselves briefly a bit more. We have Dr. Emily Elias from the Southwest Climate Hub, with the southwest-looking view behind her there. We have Dr. Kate Rotler, who is with the Southern Plains Climate Hub in El Reno, Oklahoma. And again, I'm Dennis Toddy from the Midwest Climate Hub. So, starting us off today, we're going to go to Dr. Elias, and she is going to kick off with the first session here. Let me dive in. If you do have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we will address them along the way.
All right. Thanks, Dennis. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I was at the Soil and Water Conservation Society meeting in Albuquerque 2 years ago in person. It was a great meeting, and I'm glad we have this technology that we're able to communicate. Even though we can't see you right now, at least we can talk a bit about this. And throughout the agenda today, we'll be taking moments for discussion to answer questions and talk a bit more about what each of us talk about. So as Dennis mentioned, I'm Emily Elias. I'm the director of the Southwest Climate Hub. And I'm very fortunate because I've been with the hub since before they were formed, since this was just an idea in 2013. And so today I'll tell you a little bit about the climate hubs, and then we'll move into some of the things that this network of people that you can see here on the screen has really produced over the last 6 years. So we're going to talk about how the climate hubs advance conservation in a changing climate. Next slide, please. So in 2013, USDA leadership identified a major issue, and that issue was that much of the current climate science was not available in a usable form for land managers. Next slide. And so what was really missing was this place-based knowledge transfer. We have a lot of climate models, a lot of information at very large grids across the globe, but downscaling that information and getting that information so that it can support decisions is really that science to services spectrum. And that's what was lacking and what the hubs were designed to help do with research agencies and also resource management agencies such as NRCS and the Farm Service Agency and Risk Management Agency to reach our primary audience. Next slide. And so the vision of the Climate Hub Network was agricultural production and natural resources not only maintained, but also strengthened under increasing climate variability and environmental change. So there's a lot to do with that vision, but that's what we're striving to do with the Climate Hub Network of 10 hubs across the country. The mission of each of the regional hubs is to develop and deliver science-based, and that's a really important piece of this. We're all research scientists by training, and we always rely on scientific information as we develop the outreach and tools that we do. Region specific, there are 10 climate hub regions across the country related to some of the agricultural and forestry issues within each of those regions. And so to develop and deliver the science-based region-specific information and technologies to agricultural and natural resource managers. And those are really to support climate-informed decision-making, both with USDA partners, internal, that would be NRCS, Farm Service Agency, Risk Management Agency, Forest Service, and also external to USDA. Next slide, please. And so this is how each of the regional hubs operate. So what I'm showing here is really the knowledge co-production framework. And so you'll see the science and technology providers at the top. That could be the NOAA RESAs, the Department of Interior Climate Adaptation Science Centers, EPA, and some other federal partners. Also internal USDA research agencies and land-grant universities. We partner very often and effectively with land-grant universities in each of our regions. And so those groups really work together to develop information and tools that are delivered to the technology transfer providers. That could be cooperative extension, USDA service centers, state foresters, and state climatologists or Forest Service threat centers. And those are really our primary stakeholders. But a really important part of how we operate is to listen to those technology transfer providers and also the work inland decision makers and relay questions and feedback back to our research science and technology providers to make sure that the science that we're producing and the information that we're producing is really answering the questions to help us be more resilient in the future and responsive to the needs of folks on the ground. Next slide, please. And so here's a map of the 10 climate hubs across the nation. 5 of these hubs are administered through Agricultural Research Service at some ARS research sites, and 5 of the hubs are administered through the Forest Service through their research sites. And each of the hubs has a leadership team comprised of ARS, Forest Service, and NRCS. And we operate in 3 functional areas. So those 3 areas, the first is really research-based. That's science synthesis and assessments. So we work on vulnerability assessments such as the National Climate Assessment and more regional vulnerability assessments, looking at where the pressure points are within our regions related to weather and climate to help then develop tools and technology transfer. And you're going to be hearing about that later on today as we all speak about specific regional tools and technologies that have been developed over the last 6 years. And then the last thing we do, which I think is a really important thing, is convening and education, or outreach and education. And a good example of this, which will lead into my next tool slide, which I'll be talking about a specific tool, is we got some fire modelers and fire resource managers together in Albuquerque last year. Danelle with the Northern Plains Climate Hub and myself and some others got the researchers in the same room with the wildfire managers. And what we learned was that soil moisture could be used by the modelers, and that could be helpful. And we also learned that what the modelers were producing were not related to fire danger ratings. And that's really what the resource managers needed. And so the modelers shifted, and now what they're producing really relates to some of the ground-based decisions. And so that's an example of moving forward and in convening to really come up with some solutions. So now I'm going to give you an example related to climate change in the Southwest. This is after fire. It's a toolkit for the Southwest. This It's from Park Williams and Jana Boxaglou in a publication from 2016. It's showing cumulative forest area burned across the western United States, both without climate change and then with the addition of climate change. And as you can see on the y-axis, it's nearly 25 millions of acres since 1984. And so analyses estimate that the area burned by wildfire from 84 to 2015 was twice that which would have burned with had climate change not occurred. Next slide, please. And so there are a lot of implications of this. One of those is, of course, related to post-fire flooding, debris flows, and then water quality and water resources. An example would be that wildfires degraded drinking water upstream of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Fort Collins, Colorado, and that caused the need to shift to alternative municipal water supplies. And those are just a few examples. This happens often. Next slide, please. And so this is really an example of how we work together. So of course, those water resources are at risk post-fire. However, water managers and communities often lacked that post-fire information that was needed. And so some stakeholders from the University of Arizona and water resource providers came to the Climate Hub and requested some help to address this need. And that's often how we work. And so we at the Southwest Hub partnered with the U.S. Forest Service Rocky Mountain Research Station. Dr. Megan Friggins there and Katie Driscoll are the two scientists that help develop After Fire. This was also funded through the Climate Change Office of the Forest Service. And that's a toolkit that's really a one-stop resource for water managers post-fire. It's for water managers, landowners, and communities. And the goal is to provide guidance for assessing and preventing potential damage due to post-fire flooding and related events. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to briefly show you a few of the components of the toolkit. The first one I wanted to point out as a background. It just gives really high-level information about post-fire risks in Southwest landscapes, erosion events, post-fire flood events, some success stories as well, some research information. Next slide, please. The resources are divided by those for managers, and that's really how to measure risk, because often water managers and forest managers didn't know how to measure risk. There are also some resources for communities and landowners, including Emergency Water Protection Plan, fire-adapted communities, some watershed groups. And then there are also some hour-long and day-long trainings and examples. Next slide, please. And so the toolbox provides things around programs, computer models, things around predicting the probability and volume of debris flows, and alert systems. There are also some more technical papers and guides and web resources. And then I also wanted to point out, this is really important, there's a place to find funding. This is often a place where water managers get stuck and watershed managers who can find funding. There are publications as well and photos, so you can see examples of previous debris flows, previous water quality issues and events, and then you can contact the people that may have been involved in coping with those post-fire flooding events. So this is just one example related to forestry. As I mentioned, we do agricultural and forestry work, and here's one example of one tool that we've developed. And I think now we're going to move into a discussion session. So if you have any questions related to the climate hubs, how the climate hubs were formed, of any of the speakers related to climate change or weather and climate variability, please use the Q&A box. Also, if you have any questions about how this project evolved, how the University of Arizona came together with the climate hubs and the Forest Service, or have other tools you're interested in hearing about, this would be a great time to put them in the Q&A box.
Emily, I'm monitoring the Q&A box and I don't see anything yet. I would ask if maybe one of our participants could just enter a little test to make sure it's working. We'll wait just a minute or so in case folks are typing in those. Great. We've got someone. Yep. Thank you very much, you guys, for the test. They're rolling in now. Dennis, we have our first question, but if you'd like to say something first, go ahead.
Oh, no, go with the question. I was just going to use mine as a filler, so go for it.
Great. So our first question is thanking you for the information so far and wondering, does any of our work articulate economic outcomes of climate impacts?
That is an excellent question, and Kurt will be speaking a bit about economics later on. He has a economics of soil health presentation that he'll be talking about. Also, I wanted to mention that we are all research scientists, and Danelle is actually an economist. So we do have an economist on our team, and we do often think about the economic impacts of weather and climate events, including developing the Ag Risk Viewer, which is a tool that shows crop loss by payments, indemnity payments across the country by commodity down to the county level scale. So the Ag Risk Viewer is a really good example of an economic impact tool that we've developed over the last 5 years. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Okay. I will highlight that Ag Risk Viewer if we have time at the end of the presentation so folks can have a glimpse at it. Any other questions? Okay, here's another one. Does the Climate Hubs fund outreach and education, or does it rely on funding from stakeholders?
That's a great question, right? So I mentioned the 3 pillars of what we do, research and science synthesis, tool development, technology transfer, and outreach and education. We spend quite a lot of our time and our baselines and our personal time on developing outreach and education events. We do this often in partnership with Cooperative Extension and other partners, such as the NOAA RESAs, the NIDIS, National Integrated Drought Information System, the National Drought Mitigation Center. So we do this, but we often partner around many of our outreach efforts.
And just to add to that, I would say that funding-wise, the Climate Hubs ourselves kind of have some baseline funding that supports the staff that you're seeing today and some other staff members. And that's mostly how we contribute to individual projects. But through those partnerships with other agencies or other organizations, they are often able to bring some money to the table that we can then distribute to like our cooperative extension partners or our NGO partners, to actually get all of the work done. I think,
and I'd like to add that we just completed a 5-year review, and one of the things that came out of that 5-year review, that the first 5 years, was that partnerships were very heavily recognized, that the Climate Hubs were very active and recognized for their efforts at developing and working through partnerships.
Great. Well, we're right on time, folks. I think we'll close the questions just for now. You can keep them coming in, and we'll keep monitoring them and addressing them at our occasional breaks. But let's move on to our next section.